At long last, the No Name Cinema Society has returned, ladies and gentlemen. It is Thursday, June the 7th, 2018, and we are finally back with our 48th series of episodes. And as always, we start a series of episodes with a review of a current feature, and this time it's going to be the film Adrift with Shailene Woodley and Sam Clafin that just opened this past weekend in theaters. Hello, everybody. My name is Jonathan Betzler, and you can see I'm in a different background here. I'm back in New York for the first time in a while, and you may have seen some of the vlogs, and I vlogged when we went to see this movie this weekend, so I'm very excited to be back in New York for the next, at least for now, and then this weekend I'm heading back to LA and then back to New York in about 10 days or so. So that's the deal. Let me introduce my co-hosts for the evening. Let's start with the self-important pretty boy who shirked all his responsibilities to sail the world, Drunk Davey.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, Davey, it's been 6 weeks or so since we've been on. How are you feeling?
Okay.
As good as we're gonna get. Our other co-host is an aimless drifter who performs well in the clutch. Also, our Jeopardy champion, ladies and gentlemen, Jim Carroll is back for the first time since the 1942 in review.
And thank you for having me. I feel very special. I'm sporting my little Lobot headphones.
Cyborg Jim has joined us for the evening. And I'm excited because right now, as we speak, the Washington Capitals are battling Vegas. If they win tonight, they win the Stanley Cup. And this beard will have been worth it all. I know Davey's not the biggest fan of the Caps. I'm excited to have another potential champion here. Jim does not drink. It hurts his head. And Davey doesn't drink on camera, but he's drunk. He drinks beforehand, so he's drunk for the show. So I'm the only one drinking during the show. And it is got Two-Hearted Ale here in Astoria, which I was excited to find. I usually don't see it in New York. Have you had this beer, Davey?
Yeah.
Okay. Are you a fan? Because I enjoy it.
Yeah, it's all right.
All right. So one of the fun things about doing this movie tonight is it does star Shailene Woodley, and it is the fourth film that we've reviewed in the show with Shailene Woodley, which ties her with Carrie Fisher for female actor that we've most discussed in the show. Now, of course, Miles Teller is tied with Oscar Isaac for the male actor we've most tied in the show. They have 5 each, but both Carrie Fisher and Shailene Woodley, now with our review of Adrift, will have discussed 4 different times. Davey, do you remember the other 3 movies we discussed with Shailene Woodley?
Yeah, the 2 like Allegiant things, and then the indie with what's his face, Miles Teller.
30 seconds ago, I used his name, and he's still what's his face. But yes, he actually got this one right. Insurgent, Allegiant, and The Spectacular Now are the 3 movies that we've already done with Shailene Woodley. So she's kind of like the main girl of our show. She and Carrie Fisher, we've discussed quite a bit. Our schedule, by the way, for our 48th series of episodes is right here, and it starts tonight, June 7th, with our review of Adrift. Our next Indie Spotlight is this Monday, June 11th, in which we're going to talk about Afternoon Delight, directed by Jill Soloway. And a week from tonight, on Thursday, June 14th, is our classic movie discussion. We're going to go back to 1985 to discuss Terry Gilliam's film Brazil. And on Monday, June 18th, will be our 30-second sound-off. Jim's going to be back, in which we're going to have a special announcement. Jim and I are going to recast some of the films we watched from 1942, and I'm supposed to do top 5 films from female directors as assigned by Davey and based on a review of Afternoon Delight. And that's coming up Monday, June 18th. So that's our schedule for our 48 series of episodes. Jim, are you excited for that sound-off coming up in a week or so?
I'm very excited. I have a great cast for some of these movies.
What do you say we do a summary, guys?
Sure.
Young couple Richard and Tammy are asked to sail a friend's boat from Tahiti to San Diego. On that 4,000-mile journey, they run into Hurricane Raymond, which cripples the ship and injures both of them, Richard severely. Tammy's not as expert a sailor as Richard, but she must take the helm and find a way to steer them towards rescue before they starve or die of dehydration. Davey, how was that summary?
Spot on, man.
All right. Jim, you okay with that summary?
Yeah, that works for me.
Okay, so let's do opening thoughts. And Jim and I did a vlog about the movie Breaking In not too long ago, in which Jim got a little better with the opening thoughts. So I'm going to give him a chance here to go first. and see if he can get even better. Can he do it in a sentence or even a phrase? Let us see, Jim. Just give us a taste. Don't give us the full review. Just give us a taste of it.
For a movie that I had very low expectations for, I thought it was taut, emotionally invested, and really, really above all of my expectations.
Still working on it, guys. He's still working on it.
I'm trying.
It's a run-on sentence, but I guess it is.
It was.
But Davey, show him how it's done. The opening thoughts.
Yeah, better than I thought it would be.
So what's that on the Davey scale?
Solid. I'll go solid. I was trying to think of a keeping it afloat joke, but I just couldn't put one together quick enough.
Here's what I came up with. Story structure sunk this schooner. I guess I liked it the least. And I even got alliterative on your asses. I didn't like it at all, so I'm surprised Jim had this feeling about it, and I guess we'll get to that. I mean, and taut is the exact opposite word I would use. But I do want to talk about the one thing about the movie that I did like, and that is the performances. They were net positive. I didn't think they were amazing, but I actually liked both of them. I was surprised I liked Sam Clafin. I was worried he'd be more of a pretty boy, like a Brit hunk of the week. But he was extremely believable, especially when injured. He didn't overplay that at all, and I thought that went pretty well for him. Shailene Woodley, she's not as good as she usually is, and that's the worst thing I can say about her. She's, we reviewed her a lot, and we're a huge fan. She had a number of good moments in spite of some of the weaknesses of the screenplay that I'll get to. I think she does a great job at one point in the movie delivering a very poorly written monologue about her father. You could tell the writing is bad, but she still makes it work. Overall, I don't get the full sense of her character, which I think is a screenplay issue. Again, we have higher expectations of Shailene Woodley. This is a girl that made Triss in the Divergent series feel so palpable. So she's elevated weak material before. So in that sense, she's a victim of her own expectations. In previous show, we called her among the best actresses under 30, along with Juno Temple. One moment that did bump for me is at one point she did a voiceover of a postcard to her mother, adding ums and ahs and laughter that wouldn't be written on a postcard. That's how she delivered the dialogue in person or in a phone call. A letter in a case like that should be read in a way that the other person would interpret it, and we would fill in the blanks the way they would. I'm not saying she's bad. That was just a minor performance bump, and also potentially a directorial issue. But that's the one good thing I have about the movie is I thought the actors were pretty good. Davey?
I knew that the structure was going to be a problem for you.
I'll get to that. I have a whole section on that. Let's just talk about performances right now.
They were fine. I thought he was a bit distant, but I think in context, I won't get into that any further. It made sense. I like the performances. I thought she was her normal self, which is excellent. And she just has a really good way of not being overly dramatic. When she's really upset and when she's sad and when she's crying and things like that, it comes across. It really does come across to me as heartfelt. It never feels melodramatic, really strong.
She has some really good moments. Jim, anything on the performances?
I really enjoyed them. When we get more into structure, I think I'll have more to say. I think we all will.
Yeah, apparently on opposite poles of that. You thought they were good.
I will say there is something in the character that I really enjoyed. And that is I enjoy competency in the characters. I bought that she was experienced and still a little bit out of her depth, and I liked to see. I like the way that you could see her working through problems.
Yeah, and that's another performance thing. I think I agree with that aspect of it. Let's open up the can of worms on the screenplay, and it sounds like there's going to be disagreement. It sounds like Davey predicted that I would hate the cross-cutting between the two time periods. They're two very distinctly different stories as it happens, and by cross-cutting between them, it breaks up the momentum of both. They don't add to each other, they subtract, and the movie is killed by this own idea of going back and forth in time. I personally, if I were given this book to adapt, I would have started with the 4,000-mile journey, and the storm would have been the first act break, and the surprise would have been the second act break, and the love story that is the flashbacks, that can be inferred, their relationship can be inferred from what's happening in the first two acts. I don't need it at all, personally. Davey, you knew I wasn't going to like it. What were you going to say before?
Well, it's a pure gimmick. I like it. It's a style thing, but it's not necessary. It doesn't. It's pure style. I mean, it doesn't serve the narrative, I don't think, at all. It doesn't build tension or anything like that.
Would you have hated my version of the movie that just told the story on the paper of the actual voyage?
I'm interested to see it.
Give me the money, I'll make it. I'll get Shailene back. I'll get it. I'll make it happen.
I think you can still do a first act where they get together. I don't think you need to infer all that.
I don't think so. I think that's less interesting, at least to me. Like I think I'm more interested in movies where I do glean information about their relationship, from watching them interact. Like I get a sense of their history. Like that's more interesting to me. It makes me work a little more as an audience member.
I think though you need to service the demo, which it's not us. Let's be honest about that.
This movie is a little more adult than some of the movies. It's not. This isn't Rampage.
No, that's not what I think. The demo is the opposite gender, and I think that this movie kind of does a. I think maybe one thing that you can say about the way that it's cut is that it makes that more palatable to us, so we don't have to sit through 20 consecutive minutes of them.
So you're saying the girls want the love story? Is that the sort of statement I'm saying?
Right.
Hearing
So
that?
we don't have to sit through, a half hour of that.
Now that Davey's taken us back 50 years, Jim, how do you respond to both of our statements?
Okay, well, I actually disagree with both of you. I really like the cross-cutting. I actually think in those cross-cutting scenes, as it goes forward, you get elements of the story that are picked up later on, especially for, I guess we're calling it the Act 2 surprise.
If I were writing it, it would be the second act break.
Yeah.
You know what that means. Davey doesn't know what that
means. Yes, the big reveal within those flashback sequences, they're constantly pushing forward. If I think if we went in to see it on
they're not really pushing forward. All they're doing is
they are.
Hear me out. Before I have to refute that point because they leave little details in the flashbacks to Davey's point, to make gimmicky transitions. That's all that it really is. It's not really pushing the story forward at all. It's its own separate story. It's their love story. It has very little to do with what goes on in the ocean, and they'll connect. They have objects that connect between the two periods, but that is the writers trying to justify their gimmick.
Once the reveal happens, there are moments all through the back. Like I immediately went back through their history.
Okay, but use your imagination. If we're talking about the reveal, and we're going to be very careful I don't want to spoil this one. But if you think very carefully and imagine my version of it, you still don't need the flashbacks to make the reveal work.
I liked that character development through the flashback. The only time that I worried about it was in the first 5 minutes when it was I suppose you're wondering how this all happened to me. And
that was terrible.
That first 10 minutes of the movie, I was like, oh God. But then when they brought it back and they started cross-cutting it, I preferred maybe my expectations were taken so far down with that initial moment. When I saw that they did something different with it, I was like, oh, well, it's not that. So
but
hey,
that whole flashback thing, every scene in that was expositional and poorly executed, and it also does not seem to be in the wheelhouse of Baltasar Kormakur as a director. And I don't know if we'll even have time to get to that, but I mean, the blocking was sort of stiff in those sequences. The writing was unnatural. Not only flashbacks were a bad idea, they were poorly executed.
I didn't mind them so much.
I get that impression. Other issues that I have with the screenplay in general are the dialogue. I thought actually, aside from the sailing jargon, the dialogue was very generic, noticeably basic. I already complained about the poorly written monologue about her father that's like something you might see in a play written by a middle schooler that's learning theater. Jim, you're a writer.
I think because I was so invested on the sailing side, I didn't mind the writing on the development side. There were definitely parts that stuck out to me.
Okay, so you hear what I'm saying, that there was some very, I don't call it sloppy writing, just very basic. I mean, dialogue is meant, the good dialogue is specific. You know what I mean? And it's not that.
I thought that it wasn't only dialogue, but there were things like her impulsively jumping off the cliff as a way to check the box of, let's see her as impulsive. great.
Yeah. No, agreed. That sort of leads to my next thing about characterization, but I want to see what David says about dialogue first.
I mean, it wasn't the best. I thought that I got a little cringy during the proposal. You know, and you know, he reveals some history about his family, and then he's just like, yeah, it's no big deal. It was a long time ago. I don't know. I didn't like. I thought it was kind of I thought it was kind of rough. I thought it was rough the way it was written.
Those all fit within my point about very generic screenwriting. It's the kind of thing that if I were teaching a class, I would like send back with red marker, like define this, you know, like make this real, because it all felt like very, you know, thrown together. And that sort of leads to my thing about characterization is that's the weird thing is these are real people, but they didn't remotely throughout the movie feel like it. Like we heard stories about their past, you know, but very scripted stories, overly scripted stories. We never got a sense of them. We never felt them as people. And I feel like the writers, they were focused on the plot. And if they chose one story to tell instead of the two stories, they would have had time for more actual character work. They may have operated under the assumption that the love story itself was character work, but that's not the case. It's just more plot. It's a love story. It tells me how they came to be a couple. It does not tell me who they are as individuals. And Jim, you want to disagree again?
The movie is really in service to that reveal. You talk about that family history speech that Sam Clafin gives. That whole thing serves as sort of the foundation for later on. What he talks about in that speech is at that reveal for you to go, oh, I get it.
I understand what the screenwriters were thinking, but their job is to make it feel natural. Like, you know, you don't want to feel the screenwriter's hand. Like, you don't want to feel, you know, them manipulating and contriving the screenplay in a certain direction. Like, I feel like that's poor screenwriting.
Thought even occurred to me as I was sitting through some of the love story that I really did appreciate that I did not have to sit through it consecutively. It made it a lot more palatable.
I mean, like, I just don't know if the screenwriters are sitting around a table be like, listen, we can't do 20 minutes of love story and then 80 minutes of boat action. Davy's going to kill us if we do that. That's not what they're saying.
How about this, though? Let me ask you this, because maybe the answer is the same. What if you realize that this is your lead male and you're like, I don't know, maybe we need to break this up?
The screenplay comes first. I don't think that unless you're saying this was a choice that you thought was made in the edit room and not in the screenplay.
Perhaps.
It felt specific enough with all the transitions that were built in that it was a screenplay choice. But Jim, do you feel differently?
I think it was a screenplay choice. I think that those breaks are put in there because the breaks are put in there because those disaster scenes are so tense and so there's so much pressure in them that flashback thing serves as like a palate cleanser.
I think that it might have been a rewrite. To me, it's at least believable that you see who you're working with and then you kind of restructure things.
You feel like they thought early on that Sam Claflin was a bad actor, so they worked around him?
I think it's entirely possible, yeah.
But I actually thought he was pretty good.
I think it was all right.
Is he known as a bad actor? I haven't seen him in anything else, I don't think.
No, I haven't either. I go back and forth with, was it bad acting or was it bad writing? There's some scenes that, like the scene with the reveal about his family. Wow, that whole thing just didn't work.
To me, it's all about the writing. And you know me, I'll blame the actors if
Sure, I know.
But in this case, like, it felt to me like, you know, you can hear the words, and the words just are just, you know, psychology 101 kind of words. There's nothing real about them. It's like they're invented in some sort of formulaic kind of way. Jim, any rebuttal on that?
I mean, I think the actors made it work.
What I was thinking during the movie is I actually thought it was a Kormakur kind of choice, the director, Baltasar Kormakur, in the sense that I feel like his big action piece, which is the destruction of the boat, in theory, it would be like a first act kind of thing, but he wanted it to be towards the end of the movie. He wanted to build up towards it. So he wanted to delay it as long as possible. That's what I saw as the actual choice is being made there. We're running out of time. One thing I know you wanted to talk about, first thing you said after the movie, or maybe I said it and you're like, oh, I was going to make a note about that. So I had some issues with the direction. Mainly, you know, I felt like the characters were very constricted, especially in the love story portions of it. You know, like the blocking was very stiff. I mentioned already. It didn't feel alive. Like something like the Spectacular Now, that the blocking we talked about in that movie. I actually thought the VFX were pretty bad. It didn't look right to me in several cases. The water, the big scene that he's worried about, the bird that flies around, like they didn't look right to me. And the thing that Jim had wanted to talk about, do you remember what you wanted to talk about that I mentioned as soon as the movie ended?
I don't. I remember Tom Waits.
That's what I'm saying. I didn't like the score, and then I'm like, man, they really love some Tom Waits in this movie.
They do love Tom Waits. Full disclosure, I also love Tom Waits. So
no, I like Tom Waits too. It seemed an awkward match in this movie. Am I wrong about that, at least?
I Hope That I Don't Fall in Love with You is the song that they chose. And I think it was how do we express that these are two independent souls? They're living their own lives, but they somehow fall for each other. They're like, oh, I've got this song. I don't know if it was the best song choice.
You describe it better than the way they used it. Like maybe they just used it in an awkward way. Because when it played diegetically, that was the weirdest. None of those things, blocking, visual effects, or poor music choices, none of those were an issue with the film Everest, which I watched the night before to prepare myself because I'd not seen a Kormakur film before. And I actually liked Everest quite a bit. It wouldn't make a top 10 or anything, but I thought it was pretty darn good. I was a little surprised that these were issues, at least for me. Davey, did I hit on anything that was an issue for you directorially?
Some of the editing in the scenes I think that maybe made the effects seem worse. There was a scene when she's trying to raise the sail again, and I thought it could have been a really cool scene because she was, and I'm sure she actually did that, and it was just cut in such a weird way that you couldn't really see it happen. I think there might be some issues with just the way things were cut that made the effects seem worse than they really were. Because some of like the fishing scenes and stuff didn't look bad.
I agree with you actually about the underwater stuff. The underwater stuff did look good, and I'd forgotten a little about that. That actually was very well done.
Davey, I know exactly the scene that you're talking about with the sail when she's trying to rig it up. I did feel exactly the same way that you did. I sort of lost what was going on in all of the little cuts. And all of a sudden she's there with the sail. I was like, oh, she's trying to rig it. Oh, okay. It just is so very fast, and you just get something planted in chains, and I have no idea what's going on until the end.
Maybe they had to do it that way. Maybe it just didn't go well, but it's not my sense. My sense is that it was a stylistic choice that was a poor one.
We're going to do a very quick T-word before we sign off for the night. And the T-word is, of course, our discussion of themes, where we try to dig deeper in these movies and try and talk about some of the themes of each of them, try and understand what's really going on under the surface. And in this case, it's really just trying to fish under the surface, apparently, because I don't see a lot of depth in this movie overall. I mean, it's a survival story. I get that. It's maybe about never giving up. There's a love story involved, which I personally think didn't work at all. It felt shoehorned in. I understand this couple did fall in love in real life, but that's not really what this movie is about, at least as far as I can see. So the T-word's going to be short for me. I don't know if you guys saw something I didn't. I actually feel like there wasn't as much meat on this bone. Davey, you hate the T-word anyway, so maybe you agree?
No, I mean, I definitely saw it as just a kind of in this day and age, it's just a good film with a strong female lead. And there's a scene which I read too much into. By the end of the movie, I had to discount it. But there's a scene where she's trying to open a jar, and he's like, "You need a hand with that?" And she's like, "No, I got it."
That wasn't much of anything. And I mean, like there's also like a not harming fish, even in the like the giving up of her beliefs in order to survive. She's a vegetarian, doesn't eat fish, but had to in order to survive. That might be something, but it wasn't really much of anything in the movie. It was just a beat.
It's something that she had to face and grapple.
But I mean, like, this is an issue with the movie. Like, it's dealt with so little. Like, it's not enough to really be something. Like, it's sort of like a passing fancy in the movie. Jim, do you see something more in this movie?
I think Will to Survive is always a great theme, just pushing through and persevering.
Boring.
Okay, or it's boring.
It's so overdone,
In addition to survival, I think you also have somebody at the start of the movie pretty much explicitly states that she is running away from her life. She's trying to escape her life.
The fact that she has to explicitly state it is a problem, but that's beside the point. Go ahead.
I think the secondary theme of the movie is her learning to trust herself, and learning, she sort of smack talks herself and her sailing abilities, but when it comes down to brass tacks, she has to sort of realize that there's nobody else who's going to do it for her, because
So
the only
for you, the journey, there's a journey of self-discovery in terms of self-reliance and she's
absolutely
herself she didn't know was possible. Okay. Then I feel like they did a really poor job of executing that for me. I can't believe you guys like this movie. Davey, would you actually? You said it was a solid movie, not a good movie.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't leave angry,
which is rare. That's very rare for him.
I was not excited to see this thing. So
yeah, no, I mean me either. But I can't believe I guess the current features are the ones that I like the least. Hopefully, the next one we'll all like, because I'm a little more excited about our next current feature for discussion, which is going to be on Wednesday, July 11th, and we're going to talk about Marvel's Ant-Man and the Wasp, the sequel to Ant-Man, which came out a couple years ago, 2015 or so. We're very excited to see Paul Rudd back in action, and that'll be on July 11th. On June 11th, just in a few days, we're going to have our next show, which is an Indie Spotlight, and we're going to talk about Jill Soloway's film from 2013, Afternoon Delight. It's just coming up in just a few days. So, guys, you ready to say goodbye to the audience?
Goodbye, audience.
Bye, audience.
With that, ladies and gentlemen, this meeting of the No Name Cinema Society is adjourned.